Morning, everybody. Good morning. Morning. Take a look at this photo that I'm just about to show you, and I want you to have a think what the guy's face means. You're going to have to do it for me, Chris. Oh. Oh, that's a bit embarrassing, isn't it? It's like when you had those family photo evenings with the slides and you put the family photos in upside. Can anybody tell me what's wrong with this guy's face? It's upside down. That's his face. His eyes and his mouth are actually upside down. You see, he should actually look like that. Quite a handsome chap. But if you flip the eyes upside down and the mouth, apparently most people don't notice it. And they think that's something strange. Isn't that weird? Anyway, Jesus turns our expectations upside down. We think we're going to hear and see one thing, and we hear and see something quite different. In 1971, I heard this story on the radio a little while ago. There was this guy called Sandy Robertson. He was 11 years old at the time, and he lived on a farm in Scotland. His family decided that they were going to sell the farm and go on a round-the-world adventure. They were going to buy a 40-foot yacht, wooden yacht, and they were going to sail around the whole world. So they did this. 18 months of excitement, adventure. They saw all around the west coast of America, around the Caribbean, and they had made their way through the Panama Canal, and they were in the Pacific Ocean. They visited the Galapagos Islands, which are part of somewhere in South America. And they had gone past them, and they were 200 miles from the nearest land when they felt a bump, and then another bump. And the bump turned into a jolt, and the boat started to sink. They were surrounded by a pod of orcas, whales. They had just enough time to collect a few tins of food and what they guessed would be about 10 days' worth of water in all the buckets and bottles and jugs that they could find on the boat. They blew up the emergency inflatable raft, and the 5 of them, including Sandy, got onto this raft, and they hoped and they prayed that they would be rescued. It was over 15 days before they were rescued by a passing boat. 15 days. Sandy said he had not known hunger before until then. He had not known true thirst until that time. Can you imagine it? 15 days. He said that the dinghy, the inflatable raft, was actually being nibbled away by small fish. And it was starting to sink just as they were being rescued. That is true hunger. I definitely don't know that. Skipping breakfast, lunch, and maybe having a late dinner, that isn't true hunger. Not really. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. That's the NIV translation. Or, God blesses those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. That's from the New Living Translation. Or, here's my best translation. Okay, you can give me a score later on. Congratulations to those who are hungering and thirsting to experience righteousness and justice, for they will be satisfied. Now, these Beatitudes that we're looking at the moment, these are from the first section of the Sermon on the Mount. As has been said, this is the greatest sermon ever preached. Most life-changing. It turns upside down the way we think about so many things. How big is God's blessing? How generous do you think God is with his blessing? Who does he want to bless? Who's included in his blessing? And who's out? You see, when we think about blessing in the world, we might think of somebody who got it all sorted. You know, they might have a fantastic house. They've got great relationships with their partner, their spouse, with all of their friends. They've got perhaps perfect children. Oh, Father. They've got photos on their social media, #blessed, of them on the beach, relaxing in their latest outfit. Oh yes, they are blessed. There's nothing wrong with any of those things. Those are all good things. But that is not the kind of blessing that Jesus is talking about now. Oh, I made you wait for the next bit, didn't I? So, who was Jesus speaking to? Matthew wrote his gospel without chapters and verses. So where it goes from chapter 4 to chapter 5, that was added in many years later. So I got Nikki to read from the end of chapter 4, and it said, large crowds followed him wherever he went. People from Galilee, the 10 towns, Jerusalem, from all over Judea, and from east of the Jordan River. So this shows that Jesus was talking to a multi-ethnic crowd, people from different backgrounds. You had Jewish, Samaritan, Greek, people from different religions. And although it says at the beginning of Matthew 5 that his disciples gathered round him, if you are knowledgeable about the Bible, you might think that means his 12 disciples, his core 12. But actually at this point, they hadn't been chosen. So that when it says disciples, it means the people that were following him from all over this part of the world. It says that they brought him all those who were sick, whatever the disease. These were people in need. They were not the elites of the day. They were also people who were suffering injustice. The tax collectors of the day used extortion. They needed bribes to tick the box, as it were, that said that you'd paid your taxes. Otherwise, you got reported to the Roman authorities. Blessed. Makarios in Greek. It's actually a word that's impossible to translate properly into English. And interestingly, it's not really a God word. It's an everyday word, a word that you might say to congratulate someone. Simon, a few weeks ago, used the phrase, good news, not blessed, but good news for the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This word, blessed, makarios, is what you'd say in Jesus' time, perhaps when you were walking down the street, you might have met someone and they gave you some good news, and you'd say, blessed are you, makarios, congratulations on your good news. Perhaps you've got a new job and you'd say, blessed are you on getting your job promotion. It's what you would say to someone important, someone fortunate. Makarios. Blessed. Congratulations. Good news for those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. I don't know about you, but it almost feels a little bit offensive of Jesus to use this word, blessed. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Congratulations to those who mourn. Good news for the powerless. Blessed are those who are hungry, desperate, and thirsty for some righteousness and some justice in their lives. Interestingly, Jesus was not the first teacher to say beatitudes, blessing sayings. They were a form of teaching. You can see some in the Old Testament in Proverbs. In fact, Jesus wasn't even the first Jesus to say beatitudes. There was a teacher, a rabbi called Jesus ben Sirach, who lived a while before our Jesus, and he was a very famous rabbi. We still have one particular book of his, the book of Sirach, and this is some of his most well-known teachings. Can we have that on the screen, please? There are 9 whom I would call blessed, and a 10th whom my tongue proclaims. Blessed is the man who finds joy in his children, and the one who lives to see the downfall of his enemies. Blessed is the man who lives with a sensible wife, and the one who does not plow with an ox and a donkey combined. Blessed is the one who does not sin with the tongue, and the one who does not serve an inferior. Blessed is the one who finds a friend, and the one who speaks to an attentive audience. I think that's me. How great is the one who finds wisdom, but without equal is the one who fears the Lord. So this is what people of the day thought a blessed life looked like. I think in a way it sort of makes sense, a certain kind of sense. But it says, blessed is the man who finds joy in his children. So, sorry ladies, you can't be properly, truly blessed. You've got to have joy-bringing children. You've got to live to see the downfall of your enemies. You've got to be crushing it at work. You've got to be making all the sales. I don't really know business talk, but you've got to see victory in all areas of your life. It doesn't really sound like blessed are the peacemakers to me. Blessed is the one who does not sin with the tongue. This sounds like somebody who's a refined person, who's got good education. Perhaps they went to a public school, not the comprehensive. This blessed is the one who finds a friend and the one who speaks to an attentive audience. It's sort of talking about somebody who's got status. This is what the world thinks, at least back in Ben Sirach's day. This is what a blessed person looks like. This is someone who's got it all sorted. Excuse me. But Jesus talks about a very different kind of person as being blessed. As he usually does, he's turning our expectations upside down. We mustn't look at these Beatitudes and reshape them to be a blessing upon the very same people that the world would choose to bless, the world would expect to bless, the world thinks of as deserving of blessing. You see, Jesus' words are revolutionary. He gives worth to the worthless. He gives dignity to the ridiculous. He opens the door of the kingdom of heaven and welcomes in the unlovely, the unlovable, the unlikable. Those who have not got it all made. So, is Jesus like a wealthy, good king who comes giving charity to everyone, rich and poor alike? Is he proclaiming blessing for those who have righteousness up to their eyeballs, who've got it all sorted? People who can't move for others wanting to be their friends? Is Jesus actually saying that there's blessing for those who are the have-nots? Is Jesus saying you are blessed in spite of your circumstances? Or is he saying you are blessed because of your circumstances? Why would those people who feel crushed by life be blessed? Why are people in mourning blessed? There are some different ways of thinking about this, but I think that Jesus is saying that those who are poor and oppressed, those who are beaten down by difficult circumstances, those who are in deep sadness and mourning, those who are struggling through disability, these are the people that are blessed because of their circumstances. You see, it's way easier to want a new life if you're dissatisfied with what this life has left you with. It's way easier to leave this world, this kingdom behind, and reach and grab for God's new kingdom. That's why Jesus says you're blessed when your hands are empty and open and you are ready to receive from him. When you look at everything that your life has been so far and you sort of picture it as dirt running through your hands, and all you've got is an empty pair of hands to give to God and say, I need to receive from you. The opposite is also true. It's way harder for those of us with much in our hands to open them up and to receive from God. It's not that God prefers the poor and the broken. It's that the poor and the broken are ready to receive and are open to God. That's what Jesus is saying. There was a rich young ruler who came to Jesus. He was a real success in his day. But when Jesus asked him to give up all his wealth, he goes away sad because that's the one thing it's the one thing that he doesn't want to do, to give up for God. How does this work then? How is God going to give us blessing? Well, Jesus is calling us to live in a totally different way. He's calling people to do life in a totally new way, to value people differently, to react differently, to think differently than before about work, money, giving, sex, love, happiness. Ultimately, Jesus challenges what we might think of as a truly good, blessed, right living life. He's going to tell us to turn the other cheek when someone hits us, to walk the extra mile for the Roman soldier who's press ganging you into carrying his cloak for 1 mile. He's telling us to not store up treasure here on earth, but store treasure in heaven. He's going to tell us to not judge, but to forgive. If you are looking for a religion which is satisfied after you've ticked a number of boxes each week, you are going to be disappointed, because Jesus is simply asking one thing, just one thing, and that is everything. So, blessed are those who are hungering and thirsting for righteousness, for they will be filled up. The word for hunger here really has a sense of suffering because of your hunger. It's not that just skipping a meal kind of feeling. It is really suffering because you are without food. The word for righteousness or justice, what does it mean here? In Greek, it's dikaiosune. It's a word that you'd hear in court. It's the decision that you would receive at the end of a court case for you, where the judge declares that you are innocent, that you are in the right. You have been made and declared innocent, right, by the judge. In Matthew's gospel, he uses the word to convey big ideas like justice, generosity, honesty, living right with God and with others. Blessed or congratulations to those who are desperate for justice, hungry for right living with others, desperate to do the right thing, to live God's way. So, who is hungry for righteousness and justice? Let me say first who it isn't. The person that thinks the way that they are now, the way that they live now, is right, is fine. That person can't be hungry for God's righteousness. The person who is content and happy with every area of their life, if they are a religious person with how much their religion has already shaped, can't be somebody who is hungry and thirsty for God's righteousness. You see, if we are a true follower of Jesus, not just someone who calls themselves a Christian, then we will find out that we are constantly in need of being remade. Let's think about the response that Jesus gave to someone who was desperate for righteousness in her life. The woman at the well. We had the reading from John chapter 4, where Jesus meets a Samaritan woman who, it goes on to say, had had a string of unsuccessful relationships. In an honor culture, this has a really big impact on your reputation in the community. Jesus was speaking to this woman who was a Samaritan. The Samaritans were descendants of the northern tribes of Israel, and over hundreds of years, they had wandered away from worshipping God. They had gone off the rails. They had added in worshipping other gods, local gods, with worshipping the one true God. So they were close to the Jewish people, but also very much other. It's almost like the rivalry between England and Scotland, perhaps on a football match or over a bit of history, but way more serious. So it came as a bit of a shock to this woman that this Jewish man, Jesus, should ask her for some water. You see, the Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. She was there collecting water, and it doesn't mention anybody else there. Collecting water was a sociable time, but she was a social outcast. She was there on her own. She responds to Jesus by saying, "You're Jewish, I'm Samaritan. We don't mix. Why are you asking me for a drink?" And Jesus replied, "If only you knew the free gift God has for you, and who you are speaking to, you would ask me and I would give you living water." He's offering her living water, not just a cup of normal water. He's offering living water that quenches the thirst of us inside. It reaches all the parts of a person: the mind, the heart, the soul, the hands. Jesus amazes her with his knowledge of her history, of how she's had these failed relationships. One beautiful example of the blessing of God for those in need is this. It's this Samaritan woman Jesus chooses to first reveal himself as Messiah to. He doesn't choose his disciples. He doesn't choose his followers. He chooses an outsider, somebody that was rejected by her own community, somebody that was from outside of what people thought was the blessing of God. That's who Jesus reveals his true self to before anybody else. Instead of going away from this encounter with Jesus ashamed because perhaps of the mistakes that she might have made or mistakes that have happened to her, she goes running back to the village and she tells everyone, "Come and meet a man who told me everything I ever did." You see, she's not ashamed. And she asks them, could this possibly be the Messiah, the person that we've been waiting for? So, what do we do about this? We want to bring right living to our lives, to the circle of people that we live with, that we do life with. We pray for righteousness, for honesty, for peace in our relationships, in our neighborhoods, but also in our country. Go out and we see that God wants to bless those people who the world thinks are outside of blessing. We seek to bring the gospel to those around us, wherever we are. And we want to become more like Jesus. It's not about one act of faith, deciding that you're going to become Christian. It's about having a lifelong relationship, a following of Jesus. Finally, I'm going to ask the band to come up. If you are a person who feels that they have been following Jesus for perhaps many years, how hungry and desperate are you for righteousness in your own life? Now, this is not a virtue. This blessing is not a virtue. What I mean by that is Jesus is not saying you must be hungry and thirsty for righteousness. He's not saying that. But he is saying there is blessing for those who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness, to live the right way. We don't want to stay as young children of the faith, but we want to grow and mature. and carry on. If you haven't known Jesus for long or not at all, if you've become bored, disillusioned with him, the blessing is still there for you. The blessing is to know God for yourself, to begin to become a new person. We can do this by spending time in prayer, valuing the Bible, being generous to others, spending time alone with God, and being part of a holy community, a church. We can serve and we can share the good news of Jesus with others. Blessed are those who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness and for justice, for they will be filled.